more of you from me. Can't you stand?
Soy milk. Cause cows are for calves.
It's not succulent, tasty or kind. It's death for no reason.
Hello and welcome to The Species Barrier, where two vegan environmentalists question how we interact with the planet, the other animals who call it home, and explore that barrier in place which separates the human animal from other species. Coming up today, we have three guests from three very different locations, but all are bonded by a wish to reduce suffering. As such, all are vegan and all are anti-natalist. South African professor of philosophy, David Benatar, writer of Better to Have Never Been, The Harm of Coming into Existence, joins us to discuss his work. Mistro, musical artist from Norway, has a new album out called The Tragedy of Birth, and author Jan Smitovich from America is the writer of revenge novel Orange Rain. Also in the news discussion, we attended the premiere of Unity, the long-awaited follow-up to Earthlings, and give our thoughts on it. World Overshoot Day passes, water and food predicted to run out, the Pope's encyclical covers environmentalism and animal ethics, Beyoncé's so-called veganism, techno-fixes can't save the oceans, Cecil the lion, and it's been made official that humans are driving the sixth great extinction event in geological history. So we're now into Overshoot then.
Yeah, we discussed this last year. Basically, Overshoot is the moment at which humanity exceeds nature's budget for the year. And this year it was reached on the 13th of August, which is 6 days earlier than in 2014.
Yes, we had Professor William Rees on from the Global Footprint Network, and he told us a bit more about this. And we repaired a little bit of the damage when we went to a Lincoln Conservation Group task over at Fiskerton.
Yeah, we went and did a little bit of litter picking. This is a lovely nature reserve just outside Lincoln, and it's nice to be able to go and give back and try and keep the area tidy and, you know, make it nice for the animals that live there, etc.
Yes, so you can find out more by searching Lincoln Conservation Group, and for the podcast we'll have the link in our show notes. We also gave a presentation at Leeds Vegan Festival on connecting animal rights with human population.
It was a really well-attended talk, actually. We had the bigger of the two rooms, and yeah, it was almost completely full. In fact, it probably was completely full. And afterwards, we must have had question and answers for about 20-25 minutes with really interesting discussion. When we do it in the future, which we'll hopefully be doing at the West Midlands Vegan Festival on the 24th and 25th of October, and VegFest London on the 12th of October. Obviously, VegFest runs on the 11th and the 12th of October.
We also had the opportunity to attend the Unity premiere, which had 1,000 screenings in theatres around the world, all at once on the same day.
Yeah, Unity is the long-awaited follow-up to Earthlings, which was released in 2005, so before I was even vegan. And Earthlings, if you haven't seen it, you really should. It's hard to watch, but it shows standard practice in animal agriculture. And basically, Unity, I don't even really know how to describe it. Maybe you'd be better at this.
Yes, so you can see Earthlings on the internet easily, such as on websites such as YouTube, etc. And with Unity, seems to be wanting to combine it more with human issues, and other animals play a much smaller part of this film.
Well, basically, there were 14 minutes of animal use out of 98 minutes. And it was, like Mark said, it was just sort of connecting human rights and animal rights and a bit of environmentalism as well. I think I'd almost have to watch it again, really, to totally understand it. And it was all to do with the universe and something about consciousness.
Yes, it opened with a Cosmos-style opening, which gave us perspective on our place in the universe, which is all good stuff. From there, I could argue that it was perhaps a bit anthropocentric. It often separated humans from other animals by category, which isn't very good when you're looking to create a feeling of unity as per the title of the film.
Yeah, a part of it was human plus animal plus tree. And really, it should be human animal plus non-human animal plus tree if you really want to separate, or better yet, animal plus tree.
And also, you shouldn't confuse other animals with trees, because obviously sentience is a very important criteria.
I think it was more sort of the tree was trying to represent the environmental aspect, but also You are right in that it did seem like they were almost going along the sentience line for trees, and it was quite weird. It had a lot of different narrators. In fact, about every line was a new narrator, and they were all generally celebrities. Well, they were all celebrities. But then they spoke about when they spoke about ego and the vacuousness of fame, and showing Kanye West and Lady Gaga and Michael Jackson. But then at the same time, they've got these celebrity narrators such as Jennifer Aniston and I really don't know who most of them are, I'm afraid, but quite big names, I believe.
And they even had their own red carpet event, which again was playing up to the celebrities that attended the Unity film. And while criticising the ego of certain celebrities, it was also putting all its publicity on the fact that 100 celebrity narrators have taken part in this film as well. So that was a bit confusing and a bit contradictory.
The question and answer was quite good at the end, actually, quite a few vegan questions, and they spoke about veganism quite a bit, because the actual film had no mention of veganism or population issues, which was a real shame, because I guess you could say it hinted at veganism, but you need to be out there and open.
Yeah, I would say it felt a bit toothless, calling for unity amongst 7.3 to perhaps 11.2 billion humans, that they can come together on an ecologically ravaged planet with fewer and fewer resources. That just doesn't seem very likely to me.
Yeah, I'd say people should definitely go check it out, because there's been real mixed reviews. We had, unfortunately, there weren't very many people at the Lincoln screening, maybe about 10, 11. But strangely, the vegans didn't like it as much as the non-vegans, which I found a bit strange. Perhaps the footage of animal use affected them more, because those of us who are vegan already know what happens, and therefore would push them more to change.
It was much less bloody than the original Earthlings film. There were two very affecting scenes. One at the start, which was just following a calf towards slaughter. They didn't actually show the slaughter process or anything like that. It just showed the lead up to it and the fear that was being experienced by the male bull, I believe it was.
Absolutely, that was a really tough way to start the film. This bull desperately trying to turn around, but obviously that it's the walls are penning him in, so he just simply can't, and he's bloodying his ear up as he's desperately trying to turn himself around. And as he sees his companion go into the area in which they have a bolt through their head, and it was very hard to watch. And then very near the end, there's a scene live fish eating, and where the fish are fried in boiling oil while still alive, etc. Very, very hard to watch. But there was no bloody scenes.
Another great way of dealing with suffering is to spay and neuter companion animals.
Yes, absolutely. I'm sure many of you who've been listening for a while, or you don't know, well, I'm about to tell you, but will know that I run a reduced cost spay and neuter organisation in Lincoln called Prevent Unwanted Pets. There's a few different branches of us. There's I say Lincoln because that's what we're called, but actually work in Lincolnshire. Basically, we work with some vets who are able to help those on low incomes, be it benefits anyone with a bull breed or bull breed cross, regardless of income, get access to affordable spay and neuter. The Blue Cross have just brought out these vouchers, and where they put either £30 towards a cat spay, £24 towards a cat neuter, £75 towards a bitch dog spay, and £50 towards a male neuter, and then also rabbits, neuters and spays, and horse neuters. These can be combined with the Prevent Unwanted Pets scheme, meaning that actually you can end up paying £9 for a bitch staffy spay. I spoke to Dr. Carolyn Ray from the Blue Cross about this fantastic voucher scheme. Hi, good morning, Caroline. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm the chief vet at the Merton Hospital of the Blue Cross, although I also do a lot of management stuff at the Blue Cross as well at the moment. I'm based in South London, and I work as a practicing vet as well as being a manager.
So you've spoken about the Blue Cross. What exactly is the Blue Cross, and what does the organisation do?
We're one of Britain's oldest pet charities. We date back to the 1890s, and we provide free veterinary care for animals owned by clients who are on benefits. And we also have an extensive rehoming organisation. We rehome dogs, cats, we also rehome horses, We do a lot of education work. We also run a pet bereavement support service. We have shops up and down the country. There's a lot going on in there. We do an awful lot up and down the country.
Oh, fantastic. Could you tell us a little bit about what spay and neutering is?
Neutering is a sort of blanket term that covers the sterilisation of both sexes of animals. Spay actually is essentially usually the removal of both the womb and the ovaries from dogs, cats, rabbits. You can sterilise all sorts of animals, although in some cases some vets prefer just to remove the ovaries, which is equally acceptable. In male dogs, then neutering usually means castration, effectively, and that's removal of both testicles, and the same applies to male cats and most other male animals.
Is it a fairly big procedure?
For male dogs and for cats, it's actually all very quick. For female dogs, particularly bigger female dogs, it can be a bigger procedure, but generally speaking, with modern anaesthetics and modern pain control, most animals are more or less back to normal within a day or two of being neutered. Obviously, you have to be careful to look after the wound, and obviously they're not completely fully active for a day or two more, but generally speaking, they get over it really quickly. I mean, we're not talking about the sort of 6-week recovery period that people think of, when women have an ovariohysterectomy.
So what are some of the benefits of neutering?
Provided female dogs are done when they're young, and really effectively we're talking about before they're 2 years of age, then it helps to protect them against breast cancer. And breast cancer is really common in female dogs. It's one of the commonest cancers we see, and it can be a killer. There's also another condition which is very common, particularly in older female dogs, which is called pyometra, and that's where the womb fills up with pus. It can be a very dangerous condition, can be life-threatening, and the only cure for it is an emergency neuter. And of course, it's much better to get your female dog neutered when they're young rather than waiting until they're old and unwell and having to do it as an emergency. It's also much cheaper as well to do it that way.
Are there any behavioural benefits or any behavioural downsides to being neutered?
Behaviourally, yeah, the main benefit is that you don't have to cope with your female dog being in season, so you've not got thousands of male dogs hanging expectantly around, and walks are much easier. Generally speaking, I'd say that for many people it can be very, very difficult to ensure that when a female dog is in season, then she doesn't have access to males. Obviously, the same is true of cats. I mean, female cats are naturally continually in season once they get to an age, and they are very, very keen to escape. Often they start coming into season very young. Cats can come into season and start getting pregnant from as early as sort of 3 to 4 months. And so the sooner you have your female cat neutered, the better. For males, yes, there are definite behavioural benefits as well. Male cats are much more likely to roam, get into fights. They can catch the feline form of AIDS from fighting, and if they're neutered, then that's much less of a risk. They're also much less of a risk of having an accident or getting hit by a car while they're roaming around in search of females. And the same is also true of male dogs. Again, it can make them less likely to get into fights and less likely to want to run off.
So with all this information on neutering, the Blue Cross has got a barely new voucher scheme.
Yes.
Could you explain a little bit more about it, please?
We wanted to make access to neutering as widespread as possible. We're aware of the fact that it's an expensive procedure, those costs are completely justified. It does require a full anaesthetic, and it requires trained staff to be able to administer and monitor that animal while they're under anaesthetic, and of course they need to have pain relief after the operation has been done. And so we felt worried that people who were on benefits might be missing out on the benefits of neutering. And so we have this grant scheme available. If you are on benefits, then you can claim a voucher to help with the cost of neutering, and that can be used in any part of the country. All you have to do is apply for it, show proof that you're on benefits, and then take it along to your local vet. Making sure that the vet is happy to accept the voucher before the procedure is done.
So you say for benefits, but also for those who are not on benefits but own bull breeds or bull breed crosses.
That's correct.
They're eligible too, aren't they?
Yes. So unfortunately, there are so many unwanted. Bull breed dogs are very fashionable, but so many people who get them then end up having to give them up, and we feel that limiting the numbers would be a good thing. and so therefore anybody who owns a bull breed can apply for a voucher as well.
So how do people apply for these vouchers?
It's probably easiest to look at our website, and there's all sorts of other interesting stuff on there anyway. What you have to do is to either contact our vet grant team, either by email or on their direct line or by post. And you need to send in a recent copy of proof of benefit, unless, of course, you have a bull breed or a bull breed cross dog. You have to also send in a copy of a utility bill or a bank statement just to confirm your address, and then all of your information like your name, your address, your contact telephone number, and about your animal, their name and species, breed and sex. And then, if we're happy with all that information, we'll issue you with a voucher. As I say, you do need to make sure that you check with your vet first that they're happy to accept it. Most vets are.
If you're interested in the Blue Cross scheme, if you go on the Blue Cross website, if you're interested in combining the two schemes, that's Blue Cross and Prevent Unwanted Pets Lincoln, you can find us on Facebook. You can also email pupslincoln@gmail.com. That's PUPS Lincoln@gmail.com for more information.
Hi, I'm Peter Vegan Power Ebden, former world snooker champion, and when I'm taking a break from making breaks, I tune into the Species Barrier radio show on Siren 107.3 FM.
There was a lot of attention given to the Pope's recent encyclical, which was said to be very radical, coming from the Catholic Church.
Yeah, he said, "We have only one heart, and the same wretchedness that leads us to mistreat an animal will not be long in showing itself in our relationship with other people. Every act of cruelty towards any creature is contrary to human dignity."
Obviously, he wouldn't mean it in the same way we would mean it. We would take such quotes to mean that we should avoid all unnecessary suffering and therefore become vegan. If you have those beliefs and you actually live by them, then you opt out of the process of causing unnecessary suffering.
One can only hope that some people have taken it that way and we'll see mistreating an animal as the same as unnecessary suffering, which it is. He also said the idea of infinite or unlimited growth, which proves so attractive to economists, financiers and experts in technology, is based on the lie that there is an infinite supply of Earth's goods, and this leads to the planet being squeezed dry at every limit.
Which again is good stuff in itself, but coming from the Pope leaves out the number of polluters and the people driving climate change, because he wouldn't speak about population issues, which, as we know with the Catholic Church, they oppose the use of contraception, which plays a very key part in the billions of adherents having larger family sizes. Someone almost as famous as the Pope is Beyonce, and she's been getting called a vegan in the press, saying she had a big vegan announcement and that she would become vegan, but it didn't turn out to be that way, did it?
No, she was actually promoting plant-based diets and, more pertinently, her delivery service, which is all plant-based. The word is so badly misused, and as we pointed out in our last episode, which was a review of a local vegan film, basically people think, they don't really understand what vegan means. They think we're gluten-free, or that vegan is plant-based. Veganism is just eating no animal products, but, wearing leather, silk, fur, etc. Or that vegan means, you maybe have chicken on a Sunday.
Yes, it's much more than just a diet. And talking of food, the Global Food Security Programme, which monitors food security in 57 countries, has released a report showing that global food shortages and price hikes will triple by 2040. All of this as global population continues to rise.
And also, some other bad news, data published in the recent Water Resources Research Journal as charted by NASA's GRACE satellites from 2003 to 2013, reiterated the problem that the world is running out of water. Freshwater aquifers are being depleted at alarming rates.
Hello, I am the vegan Simon Amstel. You are listening to the Species Barrier.
On another subject of water, it's been shown by some German researchers that techno fixes won't get us out of the bind, and that without stopping the use of fossil fuels immediately, which isn't going to happen, that the oceans are doomed to die. Yeah, these German researchers did their thought experiments where they tried the dramatic removal of huge volumes of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. It would return the atmosphere to the previous greenhouse gas concentrations, but it wouldn't save the oceans still. So for a long time, scientists have been talking about the idea that we're in a sixth great extinction event, but only unofficially. It's now being made official that we are driving the sixth great extinction event in geological history. Previous species barrier guest Paul Ehrlich from Stanford University said, "This study shows without any significant doubt that we are now entering the sixth great mass extinction event." And then Gerardo Ceballos from Universidad Autónoma de Mexico said, "If it is allowed to continue, life would take millions of years to recover and our species itself would likely disappear early on." And then Ehrlich just added to that, "We are soaring off the limb that we're sitting on." So there you go, we are driving the sixth extinction event as our species alone.
I'm sure most of you will have not managed to miss Cecil the lion's death. He was very well known in Zimbabwe, and he was part of a research project. He was lured out of the safety of the nature reserve and killed. This is obviously exceptionally sad.
Yes, it's definitely very sad what happened to him individually. I suppose what a lot of people are trying to achieve is give it the story a wider context, instead of all the focus being on this one atrocity or this one. People could actually be speaking about, what we've just mentioned there, the sixth great extinction event. What is it that leads to Cecil and other lions being pushed out of their natural habitat ranges? And you've got to look at things like habitat loss. Nature reserves are only tiny little pockets, and other animals have halved in number, while human animals have doubled.
And also, we've got to remember that we kill 150 billion land animals a year for no other reason than taste pleasure, and about the same for and about another 150 plus billion a year of animals who live in the sea. So Cecil's death was unjustifiable, but so are the deaths of the other animals we kill.
Yes, all those other animals are just as conscious as Cecil and just as sentient and able to suffer as Cecil was. And this dentist, he killed for the pleasure of hunting, whereas everyone else, like you say, is just killing for the pleasure of taste. Is he really that much worse?
He's a non-vegan. David Benatar is a professor of philosophy and head of the Department of Philosophy at the University of Cape Town in Cape Town, South Africa. He's best known for his advocacy of antinatalism in his book Better Never to Have Been, The Harm of Coming into Existence. What is antinatalism and how did you arrive at this position?
Well, antinatalism can be understood in a variety of different ways, but broadly speaking, it's an opposition to bringing new beings into existence. That would apply to humans, but it would also apply to animals by breeding them, for example. How I came to this position? Well, the world seems an ugly place and life seems pretty hard, and so I don't know why we would inflict more of that on others.
You know the history of the term at all?
It's an interesting question. I'm not sure whether I coined the term or whether I came across it before, so I'm really not sure of that.
But you eventually came to write your own book on the topic.
Better Never to Have Been.
Yes.
That's correct. I wrote an earlier article on it, and then developed the ideas in much more detail in that book, which was first published in 2006.
So human societies could be said to be hugely pronatalist, and there's some question whether you are serious or just having fun with a ludicrous concept, as with the voluntary human extinction movement. Are you sincere on this issue?
I am sincere. I am entirely serious about it. I think you're correct that many societies are pronatalist, although there are some that are antinatalist in a moderate sense. So there have been some societies, like China, for example, that have tried to curtail the human population growth. So they don't adopt the radical view that I'd adopt, that all procreation is wrong, but they've certainly attempted to restrict procreation, and in that sense they've been somewhat antinatalist.
The television drama True Detective's first season is said to have been influenced by your work. How did you feel about the way they broached the topic?
Well, I actually was asked to write a little article about that recently, which appears on a website called The Critique. And I noted there that the one character, Russ Cole, is an antinatalist, but he's a variety of other things as well. And so what I tried to do in that piece was to differentiate his antinatalism from other features of his character, including, for example, his alcoholism. So I don't think that being an antinatalist commits you to being an alcoholic, for example.
So in this episode, our two other guests are Mistro and Jan, and they've also expressed their antinatalism and as well as veganism through the mediums of music and fictional novels respectively. What do you feel about this, and would you urge that other like-minded people also become active?
I don't see myself so much as an activist. I certainly think there's a role for activism, a place for activism, but I think different people are suited to different roles, and I'm just not sure I'm very good as an activist. But I think that antinatalism is an important idea. I think the most effective way that any individual can avoid the suffering of others. And so I think there are a variety of ways in which people might spread that message. The True Detective was one example. I'm not familiar with the work of these guests you've mentioned, but those other mediums would certainly be other ways of conveying the message, and that seems all to the good for me.
So, ethicist Peter Singer concluded an article about you saying he believes that most people have lives worth living. Many people feel they are lucky to be alive and that life will be similarly good for their offspring. What would you say to them?
Well, I think, as I've noted before, there's an ambiguity in that claim that life is worth living. So one thing you might mean is that life is worth continuing, but another thing you might mean is that life is worth starting. And I don't think that those things either mean the same or that the same standards apply to whether a life is worth starting and a life is worth continuing. So we're all here at the moment. Our lives have already started. And questions about whether we should end our life are, I think, very different questions from questions about whether we should start lives that are like ours. And the reason for that is that once you exist, you actually have an interest in continuing to exist. That interest could be defeated if the quality of life gets really, really bad at a certain point. But before you exist, if you never exist, there's no interest in coming into existence, and so there's nothing to defeat. And that's why I think we need to apply a much higher standard when we're making decisions about lives worth starting than when we're making decisions about lives worth continuing. And so I think a lot of people are glossing that distinction. They're ignoring that distinction, which is a crucial one.
And I think there have been studies as well to show that once we are here, we have an optimism bias.
In general, humanity does have an optimism bias, and there's been a vast amount of psychological literature that has demonstrated that. Of course, it's not true of every last individual. There are some individuals who are more realistic, and they tend to be less happy than the ones that have the optimism bias.
Have you heard any rational, non-selfish reasons for adding new humans, and what is the strongest argument you've heard?
Rational, non-selfish reasons. It depends on, I think, what you mean by a non-selfish reason. Often when people procreate, they say they're doing it for the state or for some community's preservation, and it's not clear whether these are really altruistic reasons or whether they're just a kind of broader selfish reason. In other words, it's not just about my interests, but about the interests of my group. So I think you could construe those in different ways. I don't think that breeding in order to continue a community is a good enough reason either. I mean, I certainly understand the desire that people have for their communities to endure through time, for there to be new generations practicing communal practices and continuing communal ways of life. But I'm really not convinced that those would outweigh the immense suffering of the people who are brought into existence. I certainly don't think that we can be non-altruistic in terms of bringing somebody else into existence. In other words, I don't think that we benefit the person who we bring into existence. I think that person is always, in fact, harmed.
So have you encountered any arguments that you believe to be quite strong or that stumped you temporarily?
There have been a range of arguments. They tend to have, the better ones, let's put it this way, tend to try to justify some kind of optimism. And I think there are serious arguments. It's not like they've worried me in the sense that caused me to doubt the antinatalist position, but they've certainly required careful counter-argument. And I think that's a pleasing development because the initial responses to the book were very dismissive, very perfunctory, very unfair, and there are still many of those sorts of responses, ones that are ad hominem, they attack the author rather than the arguments. And so when one does get serious arguments that try to engage one, I think that's a good thing, and where I can, I've tried to respond. The volume, of course, is too much now. I just can't reply to everybody, but I'm trying where I can to reply to the arguments.
So what of the retort suggesting that antinatalists should walk the talk and kill themselves?
Well, either they haven't read what I originally said, or they need to come up with an argument for why antinatalism does commit you to suicide, because I've specifically argued that antinatalism does not commit you to suicide. Certainly not immediately. I think that life can get so bad that it may be rational to take your own life. But because that time might come in your life, doesn't mean to say that you ought to take your life now. It might be rational instead to wait until the quality of life has deteriorated to that point. But if you're thinking about whether you should start a life, you need to recognize that that life will include, very likely include, periods of that terrible suffering, and will then pose that person with a very serious dilemma about whether to continue to live or whether to take their own life. And that in itself, I think, is a very unfair thing to inflict on other people.
You're listening to The Species Barrier on 107.3 Siren FM.
Given our disproportionate impacts on the planet and other animals, do you believe misanthropy to be a rational position?
Well, I have recently defended misanthropy as one possible basis for antinatalism. In that earlier book that you mentioned, Better Never to Have Been, the arguments were all of what I call a philanthropic kind. So they were all based out of concern for the human beings that are brought into existence. But I've subsequently argued that there are also very good misanthropic arguments against bringing people into existence. And that is because, first of all, of the damage that humans do to one another, but also because of the damage that they do to other sentient beings on the planet. And I don't think that philanthropy and misanthropy in these senses are incompatible. And I do say something about why I think that's the case. I think that you can both be concerned about human beings as victims and also recognize them as perpetrators of injustices and other evils on one another and on other beings.
So almost reclaiming the word misanthropy as something other than a pejorative and a slur, that it can be a rational position to hold.
Yes, indeed. So, I think there can be misguided forms of misanthropy. So let's imagine somebody were universally misanthropic and they loathed every last human they encountered, and there was no nuance in their position. They couldn't differentiate between milder forms of human weakness and more severe forms of human evil. Then that would be a form of misanthropy that I would not defend. But I do think that humans are a destructive species, and we need to recognize that. We need to be a bit more humble about that. Even when we try to minimize the impact, the negative impact that we have on the world, it's very hard for us to get it to zero.
You took place in the South African TED Talk event, Should Meat Be Off the Menu? What are your thoughts on humans breeding sentient animals into existence in order to exploit and kill them?
I think it's an absurd and evil idea. I don't know how anybody could justify bringing a sentient being into existence in order to inflict suffering on it and then to take its life so that you could derive pleasure from eating its flesh. I've heard lots of arguments, as I'm sure you have, for why this is acceptable, but it just seems to me to be a patently evil idea.
So you're a vegan, are you?
I am. People often want to ask, do you live by these principles? And imagine I didn't. I think the arguments would stand by themselves, but I am in fact a vegan.
So what are your thoughts on veganism and how we generally impact other animals?
Well, there are a host of negative ways in which we impact on other animals. They're obviously via the food industry, where we are sometimes reproducing, breeding these animals, and then treating them badly, and then killing them. Even if we look at the fish in the ocean, which are harvested, we haven't bred those, but we inflict immense suffering on them. There's immense suffering in the research industry. Via our impact on the climate, we are negatively affecting both humans and animals. So I think there are lots of ways in which we're very damaging.
Do you advocate extinction for all other sentient animals as well? We obviously drive 200 species extinct daily, and would further human intervention to this end be moral?
Well, I draw the distinction between different ways of bringing about extinction. So I'm all in favor of extinction via non-procreation, but I'm not in favor of extinction by killing. So I don't think we should go around killing large numbers of human beings. I don't think we should go of killing animals in order to make them extinct. But non-procreation is, I think, the right route to extinction. So I'm not worried about a planet that does not have any sentient life. In fact, I think a planet of that kind would be much better than a planet like ours, which is just filled with suffering, both human and non-human animal. So I'm not worried about extinction per se, but the means may be worrying.
So we've established that it might be wrong to breed domesticated animals into existence, but would you advocate sterilizing free-living animals, for example?
Yes. Now, obviously, there are some issues of welfare concerned with sterilization because it's not a pain-free experience for that animal. There's going to be some post-operative pain. There may be other implications for animal welfare. But I think if we do this in the best possible way, that is far preferable to many more animals being bred, many more companion animals being bred.
A human pregnancy is commonly seen as a cause of celebration and congratulations. How do you react to such announcements?
That's a hard one because people want one to be pleased for them when they tell you that they're pregnant. And I do feel it in the sadness at the thought that there'll be another being that will come into existence and very likely suffer quite considerably. But what I sometimes try to do to be tactful is to distinguish between my pleasure for the expectant parent and my concern for the resultant child. I don't always express the latter part, depending on how well I know somebody, but I might say I'm happy for you.
Yeah, I've started being very factual about it in that instead of saying congratulations, I'll say, oh, how far along are you? So sort of, because obviously you don't want to offend someone, you don't want to hurt someone's feelings, but at the same time, yes. I feel like I'd be lying to say congratulations.
Exactly. I think, well, that's a very tactful method that you've employed, and I'm sure there are a range of others that one could use. So we do obviously need to be aware of the sensitivities of people who are procreating, be aware that they've not thought about these issues to the extent that we might have, that they might have different views, and we I think without compromising our principles can engage civilly with them.
You must be greatly frustrated by parents not considering these issues in advance of becoming pregnant.
Yes, indeed. I've seen research that about 50% of people who were brought into existence without a decision being made to bring them into existence. They were just the result of sexual intercourse, and that's probably the most troubling, where somebody didn't particularly want a child. In other situations, people have deliberated and they've chosen, and in my own view, of course, is that they've chosen wrongly. But at least in those situations, there's been some deliberation about it, and one hopes that they're then better equipped to make that child's life as devoid of suffering as is humanly possible. Now, I don't think that as humanly possible is ever good enough, but clearly there are some lives that are much worse than others, and unplanned children are sometimes cared for very well, but certainly unwanted children are going to have the rawest deal.
You've worked on the issue of pain in fetuses. What were your findings, and do you consider abortion to be moral if the alternative is bringing a new human into existence?
So yes, I worked on that topic with one of my brothers who's a neurologist, so we tried to combine the philosophical and the neurological interests there. And the conclusion that we came to, and this was not original research, it was really looking at existent evidence, was that fetuses likely begin to feel pain around 27, 28 weeks of gestation in that vicinity. Now, I don't think that antinatalism commits you to abortion before that point, but I think if you combine certain views about the status of a pre-sentient fetus with antinatalism, then you might be led to the conclusion that abortion would be preferable prior to sentience. I think once the fetus becomes sentient, it now acquires some moral standing, some moral considerability, and then matters become more complicated. So I would not suggest that abortion is never justified later on in pregnancy. There may well be circumstances where it would amount to a kind of euthanasia, where the being that will result will suffer so much that even though it's already got some moral status, and even though it may already have some interest in continuing to exist, we should still terminate its life. But I do want to emphasize the point that antinatalism does not commit you to a certain view on abortion. You have to combine antinatalism with other views about the status, the moral status of a fetus. My own view, given my views about fetal moral status, is that at the pre-sentient point, it would be better to abort than not to abort. But I don't think that all antinatalists have to adopt that same view if they have different views about moral status of fetuses than I do.
So where can people find out more about your work?
Probably the best place is to look at that book, Better Never to Have Been. I also co-authored a book recently called Debating Procreation with David Wasserman from the United States. I write half of the book in which I defend the antinatalist position, and he writes the other half where he argues against me. So there you could see some of the arguments for the contrary position. There are also some more popular pieces that I've written about antinatalism for those who don't want to wade through a full book. And I believe those can be found on a website linked to my name on the philosophy department at the University of Cape Town website. So there have been various pieces, I think, in like the Philosopher's Magazine and other places. One other thing I should say is that in the book Better Never to Have Been, I do give a kind of reader's guide where I tell the reader which parts could be skipped if you wanting to avoid the more technical arguments.
Is there anything else that we haven't mentioned that you'd like to go into?
No, I think you've asked a lot of great questions, and thank you for your interest.
Inspired by Benatar is rapper Mistro. Here is Your Lullaby.
My dear child, this song is for you. You won't be able to hear me, but if you only knew
Mistro is a Norwegian rapper who fuses antinatalism and veganism in his newly released album, The Tragedy of Birth.
I'm a rapper and a producer, a vegan, misanthrope, animal liberation activist, and an anti-natalist. Been producing music for about 10 years, and I launched my hip-hop project Mistro back in March this year.
So what does Mistro translate as in English?
It translates to disbelief. By that I mean a lack of faith in the human race, basically.
Your album is entitled The Tragedy of Birth. Why is this?
I knew that I was going with the title that represented the philosophy of antinatalism. As I was looking around, I saw a book by Nietzsche that was called The Birth of Tragedy, and I just thought it was a cool idea to flip it and call it The Tragedy of Birth, basically because I feel that bringing children into this sick world is a great tragedy.
So yes, Your Lullaby and Every Cradle, which are songs on the album, speak the harms of reproduction.
My dear child, this song is for you. You won't be able to hear me, but if you only knew that I love you enough to make you see in the dark.
What was your pathway into antinatalism?
At an early age, I started visiting sites like ync.com and documenting reality. Uncensored news sites that shows you videos from accidents, executions, and so on. So after watching a ton of that stuff, I started questioning how anyone could bring a child into a world like this. I was actually an antinatalist many years before I knew that there even was a word for it. Then I read the book Better Never to Have Been by David Benatar, which really goes into detail as to why it's wrong to procreate. And for me, the winning argument has always been the fact that there is no consent from the person being born to enter into existence. And for that reason, I've always compared childbirth to rape, basically. And I know that sounds harsh, but most people in general are never okay with forcing someone to do something. And by bringing a child into life, you're forcing this person to live, and it's just not right.
Yes, and then I suppose that they would say once you're here, you want to carry on because of an optimism bias.
You're also vegan, which is displayed explicitly in the songs Let 'Em Loose and The Holocaust.
I'm fighting for the ones who can't speak, those who are too weak to fight back.
What led you to this ethic?
For me, it began with watching slaughterhouse footage, basically. Then I heard a speech by Gary Yourofsky. After that, I was convinced. Then I went vegan overnight, actually. No baby steps, no digital journey. From there on, I just realized that we're all just brainwashed from birth to believe all the lies, and now I'm just working to open people's eyes to the truth. I believe that the value of life is measured in the ability to feel, to experience pain, and for that reason, all sentient life should be respected, especially all living creatures who can't defend themselves. But if you disagree with all of this after having watched speech by Gary Yourofsky, for example, then I feel that you're basically excluded and you don't deserve to be respected. That's how I feel, pretty much.
One of the songs is called The Holocaust, and for some, they get very offended over that.
I just feel that the people who find this comparison offensive are the ones who view animals as less worth than us. Like I've said, I believe we're all equal, and for that reason, it's a fair comparison, I think. Not only that, but I honestly think that the animal holocaust is far worse than any crime committed against the human race.
How would you like to get raped and forced to make milk, to be boiled and have your hair made into silk, to be skinned alive and worn as a coat, to be hung upside down and stuck in your throat?
The numbers alone, to be honest, are vastly, in a day, much bigger than anything we've done to ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And for that reason, it's much worse,
Yes, to not see the equivalence, you just have to believe that humans are a magical, supreme animal, don't you?
Exactly. I think, a lot of people just view humans as something, far better than any other species, and I don't think that's the case. It's quite the opposite, actually. We're like any other wild animal. I think it's wrong to view ourselves as better than that, honestly.
So yeah, you mentioned baby steps earlier, and you're being against baby steps towards veganism. Why is that?
Basically because, the animals does not care about your cravings. They don't care about what you're used to eating or anything like that. You know, if we're gonna make a difference, it needs to happen immediately. You know, I understand that some people find it boring to give up cheese or milk or any other animal product, but it's nothing compared to what the animals are going through every day. So the least you can do is go vegan overnight, I think.
Veganism really is just a moral baseline. It's the minimum we can do, and it's not. People who say it's hard it's not hard. Just don't eat animal products.
Exactly. Yeah.
Simple.
There are so many, you know, substitutes for meat and everything available now, and even if you can't find that stuff in your store, you know, just stick to eating beans or lentils or potatoes or whatever. You know, there's no excuse, basically.
Absolutely. I'd never met a vegan before I went vegan, and I just ate basic whole foods. Didn't have a clue what to eat. You don't need these special, you know, fake cheeses, and I mean, we certainly don't eat them. Not out of ethics, just because we can't get hold of them that easily. And it's not some big deal. I don't know why people seem to think that you have to go vegetarian, first pescatarian, then vegetarian, and then, it's really hard to give up eggs and cheese.
I went vegan overnight. It wasn't a problem, honestly. It just, I knew that I had to make a change, and I just, did it. It was easy, honestly.
It's not justifiable, is it, to cause unnecessary suffering just on the basis of our taste pleasure, you know? That's what it comes down to.
I don't think we should take part in the torture and killing of animals just to please our taste buds.
Everyone should have the right to die peaceful way. Those who can't stand to live another day. So your question might be, why not DIY? It leaves a mess and it's a painful way to die.
Final Exit speaks of euthanasia. Why did you want to draw attention to this topic?
I've always felt that we're, you know, forced into life. So at least we should have the right to a quick and painless way to leave, basically. And I think we all should have this option, not only the terminally ill, but everyone who, you know, feel like they're done with this life. Who wants to die, they should be able to do that in a quick and painless way. This life is not for everyone, just like any other thing, you know. It's some people just come into life and they realize that, you know, living is not for me, and they should be able to exit.
It goes back to that speciesism we were talking about earlier, where we're happy to euthanize and kill other animals when we believe they're suffering, but we believe ourselves to be too special to partake in it.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing.
A human pregnancy is commonly seen as a cause for celebration and congratulations. Given all we've said before this now, how do you feel about such announcements?
Honestly, it sickens me, because usually they're not celebrating the person coming into life, they're celebrating the person giving birth. And I don't think there's anything to celebrate about coming into existence. It's just the beginning of a dish of life in a dishy world that almost always ends in a slow, painful death, basically.
Would you keep that to yourself, or would you react, you know, openly, or what would you do?
I keep it to myself, you know. I never tell anyone how I feel. I don't think that's, you know, apart from my music, obviously. But yeah, when I'm outside or when I'm talking to someone, I never express how I feel. It just, it makes it worse. Basically, people don't know how to react when I tell them that, you know, I'm an anti-natalist or whatever. They just get angry and frustrated, and they don't understand. I've had people, you know, come to me with their, you know, holding their newborn babies. I have no idea how to react. I just, you know, usually I just pretend that, you know, I'm happy about it, and but it's really hard to put on a mask and pretend when I feel totally different about it.
One of my best friends said to me not too long after I'd met her, because I'm quite open on Facebook about being an antinatalist, but she has a son, a young son, and she said to me, so you hate him, right? I was like, no, I don't hate him. I don't hate children. I just personally don't want any more to come into the world because it's a pretty messed up world. Once they're here, I'll take care of them and help them. I just don't want them to have to deal with the resources and competing with other humans.
It's actually the contrary, isn't it? It's a very compassionate thing to do, and you're concerned with their suffering. You feel sorry for this new person being thrown into the existence.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that a lot of people, think that antinatalism means, hating children or hating babies, and it's not about that at all. I mean, I don't have anything against kids. I just have something against bringing them into life. So for me, it has a deep root in, just a sympathy for people who are suffering, basically.
Yeah, on this radio show we cover environmental stories as well, so we're forever seeing really bad projections for the future, and it's going to be really bad. It's going to be very chaotic.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, what have these people done any research into the conditions of the future when they decide to add a new human into existence?
Getting a driver's license requires so much work. You have to go through so many tests. You have to, pay a lot of money just to get your driver's license, but anyone can just squeeze out a baby, and it's quite absurd, really.
How difficult it is to become sterilized as well. You have to jump through those hoops again, whereas, if you just want to go and make as many humans as you want, that's totally fine and dandy.
Yeah, it's it's insane. I don't know how it's over there, but in Norway you have to wait till you're 25 years old. You have to, go convince your doctor that it's the right thing to do, and everything. So it's really hard to get a procedure like that done.
25 is not bad compared to UK. We're talking 35 or 3 kids. Normally 2 or 3 kids. There's no way. I've mentioned it to my doctor a few times, and she looks at me as if I've grown a second head.
So
and I'm 25.
That's quite bad.
What they'll say in the UK is, even if you say myself and my partner don't want to have any children, they'll say, what about if you start a new relationship and that person wants you to have children? It doesn't even come down to what you want personally. It's this patronizing idea of what a partner may want from you in the future.
Yeah, it's insane. I don't get it. It's total insanity.
So you're clearly very critical of humanity. Do you think misanthropy is a rational position?
Yeah, absolutely. I honestly don't see how anyone can feel differently. Sure, I see all the good things in life as well, and I think that's one of the reasons why I hate the human race that much, because, I see the potential in a lot of things, but there's just too much evil destroying everything that could have gotten better. And people are just so careless. I mean, just when I'm in the store, when I see people just strolling around with their newborn babies, filling up their shopping carts with the flesh of dead animals, it sickens me. People just don't care about anything or anyone beside themselves, There's just too many people on Earth.
And going back to the term misanthrope, it's used as a pejorative, isn't it? It's like, to call someone a misanthrope is an insult, it's a slur. And it's just, like you say, it's could be said to be a very rational position to, just look at everything around us and say, this species isn't doing very well.
Yeah, I don't think it should be, used in that sense. I think it's just a rational position. I mean, sure, you can close your eyes to everything that's evil, but once you've open your eyes and just looked at everything around you, I don't see how anyone can feel differently about our tragic race, basically.
Yeah, so with so many issues to address, do you see your music as a form of activism?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good way to spread the message, and I'm inspiring and encouraging everyone to go vegan and look into antinatalism and take direct action against the enslavement, torture, and killing of any animal by any means necessary. I think it's a good way of spreading the word.
It's in a very infectious art form as well, isn't it, music? Whether you're chanting a chorus or anything else, it's the kind of thing that can bore its way into someone's head.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, from my experience, the vegan community has, supported me after I released the animal rights songs, and some of those people are looking into antinatalism, and the antinatalists, some of them are going vegan now, so it's working out.
So where can people find out more about you and hear the new album?
My official site at the moment is facebook.com/Mistro Hip Hop. You can buy my album, The Tragedy of Birth, at Amazon, iTunes, or any other digital store.
Jan Smitovich is the author of novel Orange Rain. He also brings themes of veganism and antinatalism into his work.
Hi Jan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work?
My name is Jan Smitovich. I'm 30 years old. I'm a novelist. I wrote my first book at age 17 and got a degree in English literature and creative writing at University of California, Irvine, which is in conservative Orange County. And that's about the time that I started becoming aware of issues, environmental, human rights, animal rights, all kinds of stuff. I went vegetarian at age 20 and vegan at age 21, so 9 years ago or so now. And I've written 7 or so books. It's hard to say. My first one published was last year. Orange Rain actually was the 4th book that I wrote. First one published, but that's pretty common actually. I'm vasectomized. I think overpopulation is really the root of all bad things in the world. Got vasectomized at age 25, so 5 years ago now. The story and the plot always comes first for me in my writing, but I always try to infuse the plots and the stories with elements of social justice. I mean, I'm disabled too, and I've had 5 knee surgeries, and now I have a chronic pain disorder. And so writing is really my borderline sole form of activism. I have to inject everything I write with an element of social justice, but I believe that the story always comes first, and then you add the social justice or tailor it to include social justice elements. But my debut novel, Orange Rain, definitely covers a lot of ground in a very short amount of time. Everything from PTSD, the spraying of Agent Orange in Vietnam, and the effects of it on the people of Vietnam and on American soldiers, and continuing to this day. And then everything from racism to the patriarchal rape culture that we live in.
I've read the book and it's very good. I would say it's got the animal rights message in there as well. I would also say you even get round to some antinatalism in there, don't you?
To be honest, at first it was a selfish thing, and then it just became a hardcore environmental thing. And it just boggles my mind that with all these things, and you can't claim ignorance anymore. Maybe 30, 40 years ago, maybe. You could look away, you know what I mean? It was there, and people who were smart got it. But now there's just absolutely no denying that but if you're aware of what's going on in the world, there is absolutely no justification whatsoever for having children of your own. I mean, it's literally the most selfish thing you can do, and also just really messed up because there are children already here, and most especially with people who are environmentally or in terms of animal rights, conscious. It's like we talk so much, adopt, don't shop. Well, guess it's like Sarah Silverman, another comedian, heroine of mine. It's like she says, there's you got your dog from the shelter. Well, there's shelters for humans too, right? So it's just this, it's like you're adding another mouth to feed when there's already mouths that need feeding here now. So it's really, I've come to just see it as obscene, to be honest. And I think it's important that antinatalists be clear about, there's this such a stigma against criticizing anybody's choice to have kids. That's one of the things we need to do, is break that stigma of oh, your baby's so cute, oh, what a precious little. No, okay, we need to break this stigma of just grin and bear it kind of thing. I think there's a lot more of us out there, and I think it's growing more and more. About 50 years too late, but it is growing, and we need to start talking about it more and more, because change starts with talking about it. The worst thing that we can do is be silent and look the other way. We have to talk about it. We have to make people think about it. We have to force them to think about it, and that's what I try and do with my writing.
Yeah, like you said, there's so many powerful reasons behind the antinatalist position, and I think a lot of the problems people are trying to deal with and talk about miss out a huge component by avoiding the population taboo, don't they? How would you react when somebody comes to you and tells you that they're pregnant and they want the congratulations that everyone else is giving them? How would you react?
I've gotten a lot more open in recent years. I'm to that age now where high school or longtime friends or whatever, just friends, are starting to have kids and whatnot. And I think the best example is when my best friend, and she told me she was pregnant, and I said, have you considered abortion? That's an option, right? And I started talking all about this, and she threw out the, we need more vegans thing, and I just, told her all I could, and she said they wanted to keep it, and I haven't talked to her since, to be honest, except to, I did, for old time's sake or whatever it is, wish her on her birthday. I sent her a text that said, happy birthday, hope you and your little one are doing well. But, my my initial reaction and my silence since then has, spoken a lot more strongly than one little, kind, text message. So basically, to answer your question, I sign off on them more or less. I'm not interested. I don't care what people have to say once they become parents.
When you understand the issues that we're going to face in the future, and you've spoken to them about all the problems with bringing a child into the world, and they still decide to go and do it, it can be very harrowing, I guess.
I say that it's an act of sadism at this point, knowing what we do, knowing what the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years is going to be like, knowing what's going to happen to every child born today, let alone, everyone alive in the next 20, 30 years. I mean, we're facing catastrophic environmental change and industrial collapse. This is just basic mathematics talking here. How could you do that to someone? It's an act of sadism. It really is, especially when there's children in foster homes quite possibly being abused, undoubtedly dying for a permanent home. It's quite honestly, it's sick. It's sick. Like, let's just, take off the veneer of social conditioning and kindness, and let's just call a spade a spade. It's sick.
And we were, just before we came in now, we were talking, well, not talking, on Facebook with a lady who has biological children, and she was saying, but all adopted children are completely messed up, and, it's so hard to adopt. And, I find that I'm adopted myself. So, firstly, that's just rude. And secondly, it's a complete and utter lie. It's like saying every animal in a rescue shelter's messed up. They're not.
One of my dearest friends, Luke, he was born of a crack-addicted white trash, I guess, person, and he is one of the most kind-hearted, beautiful souls I've ever met in my life. I mean, he's literally, quite literally talked me down from the top. He's one of the people that I call when I'm in that place where I don't want to live anymore or something, and he'll talk me down. And he was born, his mom was addicted to crack, okay? So, and he's one of the most amazing people I've ever met. So it's total fallacy to think that they're damaged somehow and that your genes are somehow magically superior. Look, the gene pool is so polluted at this point. After this many generations, we're all messed up.
Yeah.
Adopted kids are no more messed up than your own kids are going to be.
Exactly. There's no guarantees on how their own are going to turn out. They're always taking a gamble. Always. There's no guaranteed outcome.
Absolutely.
Hi, this is James Lightning Wilk, vegan and winner of the Ultimate Fighter. You're listening to Barrier on Siren 107.3 FM.
In your book, you've got a really interesting bit about baby strollers. Would you be able to read the text out for us?
So this is from my debut novel, Orange Rain. It's about 2/3 of the way through. Writing this, I'm thinking about how strollers actually do resemble bulldozers, both in form and function, and how they have a directly proportional economic relationship. The more baby strollers needed, the more bulldozers will be manufactured to clear wild lands and make way for the suburban housing development and agricultural fields necessary to support those endless, shrieking little fish factories and their offspring ad infinitum, until the only wildlife left will be the imprisoned mimics in zoos, until the ocean is so choked with pollution and shit that you can walk from Los Angeles to Maui on a bridge of floating plastic garbage, until the tap water is so toxic that you have to use reverse osmosis and UV rays on shower water just so your flesh doesn't erupt in chloracne. The warehouse residents understand. Human breeding is counterproductive to the goals of the revolutionary activist, but it's also counterproductive, to put it mildly, for everyone, for the very continuation of life on Earth. Why is it so hard for people to understand? Why is it so hard for people to see that reproducing is in nobody's best interest? It hurts everyone, and I do mean everyone.
Well, as obviously being an antinatalist, you're also vegan. Why did you become vegan?
I became vegetarian first when I saw my then roommate in sophomore year of college gut a live fish, a fish still gasping for oxygen, and he gutted him or her from head to tail. And for the first time, honestly, really in my life, I made that connection between a meal and somebody's life, and the scales tipped, you know what I mean? And I said, okay, I have to try to be vegetarian, and I knew nothing about it. Nothing. I mean, like less than nothing about it. Okay, I had met like one vegetarian in my life, and so I tried it, and my grandma said that, told me that it's actually healthier, and I said, huh? You know, I mean, really, really just unforgivably ignorant about it. But then, so after that, I tried it and found it to be very, very, very positive and life affirming, and gave me courage to do things that I never thought I'd be able to do. Like, I went to New Orleans twice after Hurricane Katrina and did relief work, and it may sound strange, but I would have never gone if I hadn't gone vegetarian. It just opened up this whole, it just blasted my universe open. And then I just kind of, I knew nothing about the cruelty of the dairy and egg industries. I kind of just ideologically, it clicked that I should at least, if I believe that animals have rights to bodily integrity, that I should at least try to go vegan. And I tried, and I'm still going. 9 years later, I guess the experiment worked out. So, and it's kind of, I just always find it funny, because usually most people, you know, they hear about the cruelty of dairy and eggs or whatever, and then they go vegan out of a moral feeling of obligation. I went vegan before I think I'd met maybe one, maybe two vegans in my life. I knew I was friends with no vegetarians even, let alone vegans at the time. Now I'm surrounded by nothing but vegans, but it's changed a lot in the last 9 years. Like you people who don't know wouldn't believe. I went vegan on an ideological basis, and then a couple months in, then I learned that dairy and eggs were cruel. So it's kind of strange, way to go about it. But I just saw it as being ideologically consistent with vegetarianism's aims or goals or whatever you want to call it. And I definitely try and infuse all of my writing with at least some elements of animal rights.
Oh, that's brilliant. It's quite similar to me. I'd never met a vegan when I went vegan. And I'm not sure. I think I'd met one vegetarian. So it's, it can seem quite a big thing. Whereas nowadays, like you, I'm surrounded by vegans, and it seems quite strange. My Facebook's just full of vegans, and now it's more strange for someone within my circle not to be vegan than to be vegan.
I went plant-based, similar to you, before I knew what ethical veganism was. Really, but with me it was kind of like a yuck factor. I found the idea of eating a chicken's ovulation disgusting, and the natal fluid from a cow, and just all these ideas were just disgusting to me. So I just gave them up basically. And then later on, by being in this position of what would be a so-called vegan diet, the word vegan came to me, but and so did the ethics. But originally I was just disgusted by the
interesting.
The milk and eggs.
That's kind of funny, because I stopped eating eggs like 5 months before I went vegetarian because it grossed me out, and then somebody convinced me that it wasn't gross, I guess, and but it was it's even when I was eating meat and pit milk from a cow, like I say, it's gross. There's a picture I just posted on the Facebook that shows an egg coming out, and it's like, are you kidding me? You're gonna put that in your mouth? You know what I mean? It's gross. It's truly, once you take the blinders off, there is just so much in this world that is absolutely repulsive, morally, aesthetically, just repulsive. And it's hard. It's really, really hard sometimes to be aware, but I couldn't go back. You know what I mean? There's so few people that are conscious of what's going on and what human beings are doing to this planet, and all the catastrophe and death and mass murder that we're causing, that we have an obligation to take that pain and synthesize it into something productive. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, given our disproportionate impacts on the planet and on other animals, do you believe misanthropy to be a rational position?
God, yes. I'm misanthropic to the core. I'm antisocial. I don't like people. I don't like being around people very often. I have my wonderful partner and fiance Andrea, and our dogs and pet companion rats, and I could go weeks, months without caring to see another human. And I like to say that I love persons but hate people. So it's I have deep, abiding, unequivocal love for individuals, but in my mind, no rational person can possibly see humans as anything but parasites on the planet. No offense, humans.
It makes total sense. We're predisposed to love and protect those within our circle, but when you understand what we as a species are doing to the planet, you even how can you like us as a species?
Maybe only economists could like 7.3 billion humans en masse. Yeah,
I think there's so much atrocity in the world that most people cannot possibly bear to have the blinders off, and so they kind of keep them on as a means of survival, because they couldn't live with themselves if they owned up to the destruction and absolute, just unfathomable amount of killing and cruelty and suffering that we cause just by being alive. And it's not natural. It's not a natural thing. We've completely removed ourselves from all systems of nature. We're not even animals anymore in the good sense. You know, I think we've completely removed ourselves from nature, and it's driven us insane, and that's pretty much what it comes down to me.
We're surprised that mental health issues are soaring when we're so disconnected from nature, and we are animals, and yet we live in these buildings, and we go to work in a city, and we pass nature if we're in a car.
And we're around a number of people that we're not evolved to be around. Like Jan was talking about earlier,
Right.
he likes to be in solitude, but we were evolved to be in small tribes, and nowadays we're in this mass society, and it's just way too overwhelming, too much stimulus.
What projects have you got coming out in the future?
Right now, I'm trying to shop my prison memoir, so I'm shopping that to agents and publishers, and I have a book that I wrote before Orange Rain, the one that's out now. The third book I wrote, Redwood Falls, I think I'm going to self-publish, and now I'm working on a novella about the assassination of Ted Nugent.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Please stop having kids. Care. Just have compassion. You know, open your eyes, wake up, try to do something. You know, we don't have much time. There's maybe time to save some of what's left. It's just the right thing to do. Living in a way that impacts natural ecosystems and non-humans and your fellow humans as little as possible.
Brilliant. Where can people get Orange Rain?
In the UK, it's available through Amazon.uk, both in ebook format and paperback, and then else it's available in many countries through Amazon.
The fact of the day: when you think of endangered animals in Africa, the classic elephants and rhinos probably come first to your mind. Yet there is another iconic African animal that has been flying under the radar for years when it comes to population decline, and which needs our help. In 1999, there were around 140,000 giraffes in Africa. Today, the population has plummeted to an estimated 80,000 giraffes left in Africa. That's a 40% drop in the last 15 years, but nobody is talking about it. As the human population grows, the population of the world's tallest mammal declines almost by default. A strong human presence means more settlements, roads, and destruction of the giraffe's natural habitat and main source of food, the acacia tree. A large proportion of the giraffe's habitat is now being used for agricultural purposes, depriving these gentle giants of even their homes. You can contact us on thespeciesbarrier@gmail.com. We're on Twitter @speciesbarrier. You can find us on Facebook by typing in The Species Barrier. And our old episodes can be listened to by going on archive.org and typing in The Species Barrier. And we're also on iTunes, where we love reviews.